Welcome to the session. Thank you to everyone who is joining us. I hope that you're here because you're interested in learning a bit more how you can access and analyze IATI data using some of IATI's data access tools. So this session is going to be divided into two segments. So the first segment is going to be covering some of the new features of the Country Development Finance Data Tool. And there'll be some time for Q&A at the end of that segment, and then we'll move to a session led by Alex on Datastore Search. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah McDuff, and I work for UNDP as part of the IATI Secretariat, and I lead on partner country support and data use, and have been working for the past few years with a colleague, Mark Bruff, who's a consultant who's implemented the technical end of this work to develop the Country Development Finance Data Tool. So for today's agenda, for this segment, we're going to cover some of the context and history of CDFD before jumping into the new features, and a demo and exploring some example queries. And then I'd like to hear some queries from you so that we can in real time kind of explore some of these questions using the tool. So to start with, and I apologize if you've already seen this slide multiple times in the past couple of days, I just think it's always helpful to start with the broader context of what IATI as an initiative is trying to achieve, and how this work and this tool and the new features that I'm going to show you today fit within this broader context. So of course, we're in the middle of the implementation of our strategic plan that goes from 2020 to 2025. And at the beginning, we kind of mapped out at a high level how we were going to enable increased data use, which is obviously a core objective of the strategic plan. So in order to do this, we needed to understand the barriers to data use, and then, of course, work to address those barriers by strengthening the standard, improving the quality of data, improving access to data, and making sure that we were providing the resources and training that enabled us to strengthen data literacy and capacity for use. And this work obviously involves the Secretariat, but more importantly, it involves the whole community of IATI, right? To make progress on these objectives, we have to have the participation of the entire IATI community. And obviously, the overall goal is to overcome these barriers and increase the systematic use of IATI data. So what is the history of this Country Development Finance Data Tool, and what have we learned? I think that most people in the IATI community are most familiar with our most popular tool, which is called dPortal. And you've probably been to dPortal, and this tool may be new to you, so I want to just explain a little bit of the background behind why this was developed, and sort of some of the changes that we've made along the way. So this tool was specifically developed at the beginning to meet the needs of partner country governments for a standard set of essential data that could be easily accessed and analyzed. And the goal of developing this tool was intended from the beginning to be an interim tool and to learn from its development and use that learning to inform the other work of the Secretariat, including plans, sort of our long-term plans to create an improved data portal, dPortal like version 2, and to improve IATI's data quality work, improvements to the standard, these kinds of things. So the goal was to kind of learn from this experience and inform other work of the Secretariat. So the initial version of the tool was launched in March of 2021 after conducting extensive consultations with governments on what information they needed and what format they needed this information in to be able to make use of this information at the country level. So when we initially launched, the tool was a subset of IATI data that was processed and presented in an Excel spreadsheet to enable easy analysis and pivot tables. We launched it with guidance and analysis dashboards. And last year, we also launched some how-to videos to help data users understand the data and understand a bit more about how to analyze it. So over the past couple of years, we've done a lot of training, both one-to-one trainings and support, as well as larger workshops last year in Kigali, Abuja, and Bangkok. with governments, civil society, with development partners. And we've, of course, had lots of users to the site itself, who we don't know who they all are. But we've had a lot of engagement and learning through the use of the tool. And it's already starting to be used with some examples there on the screen. And we have quite a few governments who are using the data now from the Country Development Finance Data Tool, which is IATI data. They're just getting it through this tool for national level processes. We have researchers that are using the process data from CDFD for their work. We have civil society organizations and development partners using it to conduct external development finance landscape analysis. And landscape analysis is one of the key things that it's very easy to do with this tool. And there's others, but just to highlight a few. So what did we learn from all of this engagement and feedback and use of the tool? What we learned was that data users need a processed subset of IATI data to enable them to more easily understand, analyze, and use the data. So historically, data users had to kind of do the work themselves to process the data to be able to use it. So this, for a very long time, was a request of not just government data users, but other data users to have a processed set of data that they could more easily analyze. And what we also learned after designing the tool initially for governments was that it was useful to a lot of other data users, and that data users reached out to us from all different stakeholder groups to get support in using it and found it useful. We also learned that guidance is essential. We had a lot of feedback that the guidance was very helpful in helping people navigate and be able to understand the data fields and how to analyze and use the tool. And that the availability of the tool in multiple languages increased its accessibility to French speakers, to Spanish speakers, to Portuguese speakers. So this is something throughout the development, and again, that we've offered, and I think is really important, and something that has been asked from the IATI community for a long time, is to make the data and our tools accessible in other languages. And we also found that having this processed set of data that allows you to look at the data across organizations allows you to more easily see some data quality issues that inhibit the use of IATI data, like seeing gaps in the data, or we talked about this morning, some of the things we talked about this morning in the data quality workshop. But of course, we receive feedback, on what people still needed, right? So this is progress, but obviously this isn't the end of the road. People still need additional things. So what people told us is they needed visualizations. And they also needed to be able to generate custom reports, right? So a lot of people doing cross-country analysis reached out to us because initially the files were basically one file per country. And data users needed to be able to do analysis across, maybe I'm looking at these 3 publishing organizations in these 4 countries. So they had to download multiple files, combine those. It became sort of a complicated Excel task to be able to do that analysis. So they wanted to be able to generate their own custom reports. People also said that they needed additional data fields. Descriptions is a very common data field that a lot of researchers and analysts use to look for specific things that are maybe, it's not included in a sector category, but a specific thing. So oftentimes we would have to download data from the data store and from CDFD and combine it so people could do their analysis. So we've added the descriptions. There's definitely a demand for location data. That's something we're still working on. It's not yet available in the tool. And also something that people have told us from the very beginning of when I started working for IATI and at the end of 2019, is that it's very difficult to know all of the publishers that are part of particularly bilateral governments. So I think the US government now has maybe it's 20, I don't quote me on that number, but there's 20 different publishers under the US government. So when a data user is okay, I want to know what the US government is doing in Liberia, they have to look at all of those publishers to be able to get a full picture of what the US government is implementing in Liberia. So this is one thing that we've recently implemented, and if anybody in the room has feedback on this, this is sort of the starting point for trying to group together publishers. So we have UN agencies, and I'll show you that in the tool. Okay, so based on what users told us that they needed, we developed some new features. So I won't spend too much time on this because I want to show you the features themselves, but we've developed a summary dashboard, dashboards by country and region, reporting organization and sector, which enable data users to kind of easily visualize the data in maps, charts, and tables. And the goal of this, I mean, you may use the table in your work, but I think it helps people to quickly get a sense of how you can analyze and potentially use this information. There's a lot of data in IATI, a lot of really great data, but I think sometimes when people look at it, it feels a little overwhelming. So this kind of gives you a sense of like, okay, how can I analyze this information? What could I potentially use it for? You can also download the underlying data for the visualizations. And there is the custom data download, which allows you to generate those custom reports, which I'll show you. And then there's some other useful functionality in the tool that we've added based on feedback. So we've added some links to activity pages in dportal. As I said, dportal is our most popular tool, and it's the best place to look at all of the activity information for one activity. So you can go directly from CDFD to dportal to look at activity information. The groups are now available. You can share your visualizations with others with persistent URLs. And the descriptions are now available in the custom data download. And again, it continues to be available in multiple languages. So now I'm going to stop with the slides and move to a demo of the tool. Okay, so one of the changes we made, if you've been here before, let me just ask, how many people in the room have visited this tool before? Okay, all right, that's quite a few. I'm happy to see those hands. So you might notice that it looks a little bit different than it did a couple of months ago. So initially, as I said, you would just arrive at this page and you would be able to download individual files. So the data that is made available here now is the same that the data we had before, right? It continues to be updated as publishers update their data, of course, but it's the same data fields except for the added descriptions. It's just that we've made it possible to visualize the data and download it in custom reports. So if we go to, so on the homepage, you'll see here where you can explore the data dashboards. This is the summary dashboards. Then these are the dashboards, the other sort of specific dashboards. Here you can still access the data files. So this is what I was talking about. So like you can download the file for Angola, English, French, Spanish, or Portuguese. And then you have that data file that you can analyze. And then you have the custom data download as well, which I will show you. So you can access all of the main functionality here on the homepage. If you're looking for additional guidance, you can find that here in the About section and find the guidance documents that are available. And there's also the how-to videos that are linked on that page. So let's take a look at the summary dashboard. So let me scroll down. So basically, when you go to the summary dashboard, this is analyzing all of the data that's been published to IATI according to the filters that are selected on the dashboards. So you can see here at the top some of the core filters, or you can select whether it's in USD or Euro. You can look at budgets or spending or both. You can choose the calendar year you want to look at, or you can choose the calendar year and quarter. Of course, for some doing analysis, like they want to look at a particular fiscal year that is not the calendar year, so you can select the quarters to be able to look from like July to June, for example, which is particularly important for governments. So here's the summary map. So basically, I'm going to switch it to spending, but this shows you all of the spending for 2022 by country. And you can scroll over the countries and see the amounts. And then if you click on the country, then it takes you to the individual dashboard for that country. Then we have a summary graph here for by reporting organizations. So you can see the World Bank spent the most money in 2022. Then you can see the other organizations. For example, USAID doesn't report budgets, so that's why that budget information is blank. This is what I was talking about, was sort of identifying some of the data gaps that you can kind of see here. And you can adjust all of these visualizations to look at more organizations. You can also look at it in a table. And then if you click on these, then it takes you to a specific dashboard for that particular publishing organization. So there's a lot of the same functionality that's kind of integrated throughout the charts to hopefully make it user-friendly. And then if we go to the bottom here, we've got by sector categories. So you can look and see that the most money in 2022 was spent in emergency response. And again, you can expand this and look at it more deeply. But then you can also filter these summary visualizations. So like, let's say you wanted to see, okay, what are all the UN agencies doing, or what did they do in 2022, right, in terms of spending and sectors and such. So you can go to the more filters. So you can filter by all of the data fields that are available, most of the data fields that are available in the Country Development Finance Data Tool. But if you wanted to look at all UN agencies, you can select this group. You can come down to United Nations, you apply, then you can see all of these UN agencies that are selected and included. You close that, you can see the filters that have been applied here, so you can easily understand like sort of, like what your visualization is being filtered by. And then this shows you UN agencies, budgets, and spending in 2022. And so here, if we go back to the graph, you can see both budgets and spending for UN agencies, and then you can see the allocation by sector. So just to give an example of how you can analyze this, like just another useful way to filter this is also if you wanted to look at potentially like humanitarian versus development. So you want to look at humanitarian assistance, you can filter this entire set of visualizations and only look at humanitarian assistance and look at where that is going and how that money is being spent. But I also want to show you the individual dashboards. So like if we want to look at a recipient country, which country should I select? Any suggestions from the audience? Moldova. Okay. All right. Let's look at Moldova. All right. So again, it has similar sort of filters at the top, but basically it starts with a summary visualization, which shows you in the past 3 years, the current year, and the future 3 years, budgets and spending. Obviously, in the future years, you're only going to have the budgets. You should only have the budgets, but it gives you a picture of what's been happening, over 7 years. And then you have visualizations showing you like by reporting organization, by sector category, by finance type. So whether, Moldova is receiving grants or loans, by aid type, is this project support, is this budget support, what is the modality of the support that's being delivered. By reporting organization type, is this a multilateral? Is this is assistance providing by multilaterals or bilaterals, by NGOs? And then this is a split by development and humanitarian. And then if you go to the bottom, this is by activity. And so these are all of the activities in which there was budgets or spending for 2022 in Moldova. And you can see here, this is the one with the most spending. If you wanted to explore this World Bank project in more detail, you can click on the link and it takes you to the D portal page so you can explore the activity in more detail. But just to give you one example of how you could filter this, like let's say you wanted to look at a particular sector category. So you wanted to look at spending and health. You can quickly select the sector category of health. Then you can scroll down here and you can see, okay, again, the World Bank spent the most money in health. You can see the sector category visualization has been adjusted so it only shows health. And then you can just sort of see how the resources in health have been allocated, whether multilaterals are spending the resources on health or what other organization type. And then again, these would be the activities in health. And again, you can increase this to 100. And then also really important is that you can download this in Excel, right? So for every single visualization, you can download the summary data into Excel. And then let's say you wanted to further customize this. You were like, okay, well, this looks interesting, but I want to add an additional data field to this list of activities. You can click on the Customize button, and this immediately takes you to the custom data download, where you can customize your own report. So I want to go back quickly just to quickly show you the other two dashboards, and then I will come back to the custom data download. But just want to show you, like, by reporting organization, all the reporting organizations are listed here. You can also choose them from the drop-down, so there's a couple different ways to select them. But if we wanted to look at the African Development Bank, for example, we can pull up the African Development Bank here. This makes sense. The African Development Bank works in Africa, so you can see all the money is being spent or budgeted, and then also being spent in Africa. And then you can see all the other analysis for the African Development Bank. Similar approach for sectors. So let me choose education. I always choose health, but here's education. You know, like, and then, like, if you wanted, you know, like, there's more disaggregated sector categories, you can drill down into more specific areas. There's a lot of ways in which you can customize the visualizations based on what your research question might be. So let's go back to the custom data download. So basically, it's called a custom data download, but basically, it allows you to generate custom reports. So I will show you one example. So basically, at the top left here, you have the columns that you want to include in your report. So there's a drop down here, and you include any of the columns that you want to have in your report. By default, it shows you the recipient country, the IATI identifier, which is the unique code for the activity title, the budgets and spending, and this is defaulted for 2022. It has similar filters that I previously showed you in the dashboards. So you can choose recipient country, the reporting organization, a group of reporting organizations, you know, and the budgets or spending or both. And then there are the more filters at the bottom. So it's similar functionality. Okay. Sorry, I usually go over, so I appreciate that. How much time do I have left?
1 minute to present and 3 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me quickly generate a report because I want to at least take one question for the audience, from the audience. Okay, so like if, for example, let's say you wanted to look at all of those US organizations. So I'm going to click on the reporting organization group, select the United States. Let's say we wanted to look at spending for 2021 and 2022. Oops. Going to go back to the top, and I'm actually going to remove some of these more specific items. But you can then get a summary of, like, okay, this is all US government agencies spending in each of these countries in 2021 and 2022. And then I also just want to quickly show you, so if you add back the identifier and the activity title, then you can also add the activity description. And that gives you more information about the activity. And again, you can click on the link and go to dPortal if you want to explore the activity in more detail. So hopefully, I know that was very quick. I had to consolidate this down a little bit based on from what was originally planned. But can I at least get, like, one question that somebody might want to explore with the data? I think we probably only have time for one. Yes, Johanna, please go ahead.
I was wondering whether the reporting organization groups can be used as, like, when you were looking at, like, a whole range of activities, I was kind of thinking, and especially on the graph, I was kind of thinking, I'm not interested in the breakdown of all of the UN. I would like to be able to lump the UN all in one, but still have all of the other publishers beside. So do we have access to the reporting organization, to the groupings in the, in the visualization, not as a filter, but rather as an aggregator?
currently, like, there isn't an aggregation of that, but I mean, that's good feedback. Like, I think that, like, you know, like, I can definitely understand how that's useful. So, like, but not currently. So, like, obviously you'd have to, like, sum up all of them, but, like, that's, I mean, yeah, again, like, I could definitely see how that would be useful to have in the future to include that. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the demo. Excellent, excellent tool and such an improvement to the portal. So congratulations on that. Quick question, do users have the ability to drill down? So for example, if I see that UNFPA spends $5 million in Nigeria, for example, and I want to see exactly what those $5 million are composed of, what are the drill down capabilities for that? Thank you.
Yeah, let me just show you that really quickly if I have time. Last thing, okay. Just to look at that specific example. So like if we wanted to look at, okay, like let's go to Nigeria. And then we would go to more filters. And then we would choose UN. Whoop. Yeah, okay. Let's get it. Okay. UNFPA here. And so this would be UNFPA budgets and spending in Nigeria, and then you could further filter this based on other things you might be interested in. But this, if you go to the bottom, then you'd specifically see all of UNFPA's activities in Nigeria that have budgets or spending for 2022.
In the case of the UN agencies, how different is this report from the report of FTS, Financial Tracking System of the UN agencies? Have you ever compared those?
That's a great question, and I probably can't answer that, but I am happy to. I'm sure other colleagues might be able to have that discussion after. Maybe other colleagues could, okay.
Yeah, just from the UN perspective, FTS is humanitarian only, so what we publish is beyond humanitarian, so the list alone would be more. So the FTS is just a small portion of what would generally you would see in IATI. But if you mentioned filtering on humanitarian in there, you'd still probably see a difference.
Yeah, but
everybody has more in IATI than what you see in FTS for sure. But yeah, I don't know if that would be a case to look at later on in terms of just getting to humanitarian, but.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at the, you know, like not everybody includes the humanitarian flag, or there's some differences anyway. So like, but I do think that, yeah, I mean, you could definitely explore that in more detail, what's included under humanitarian and then what's included in FTS. I think just to make sure we have time for my colleague's presentation on Datastore Search, I just want to hand over to him, but there's going to be room for questions at the end, so write your question down. And then we will come back and answer questions on both of the tools at the end. Yeah.
You can take some while I set up as well.
Okay. And if it's a non-demo question, he says I have 1 more minute. So if it's a specific question? Yes. Okay. I think there was one in the back here, so maybe, but I don't have my headphones. I don't have the, hold on. I just need the interpretation. Hold on. Thank you. Okay.
Ok. C'est bon? C'est bon? Allô? C'est bon? Merci. En fait, c'est par rapport au tableau de bord. Et les filtres qui ont été présentés, je pense que quand vous regardez le regroupement par région, par organisation et par catégorie, il serait mieux, bon là c'est des exceptions, et qu'on ait la possibilité, puisque quand on a le pays, qu'on ait un niveau encore de désagrégation, donc ce qui veut dire que la partie maintenant organisation déclarant puisse être liée et on peut facilement descendre sur la catégorie de l'apport, puisque là ça permettrait vraiment une bonne appropriation. Puisque pour les utilisateurs, il faudrait que l'interface leur soit conviviable. Donc, si ça demande encore de faire beaucoup plus de gymnastique pour pouvoir avoir un bon affichage, des fois, ça rend un peu lourd l'exploitation. Mais si c'est de façon très simple. Déjà, il y a le tableau de bord. On sait que c'est de façon synthétique, c'est des suivis, des indicateurs qu'on suppose être beaucoup plus pertinents. Donc, cette présentation, si on essaie de faire le lien, déjà, la maquette y est. Donc, c'est de pouvoir faire le lien maintenant entre le niveau de filtrage. Et le deuxième niveau, justement, c'est par rapport toujours au niveau maintenant des données. Et quand on part sur le regroupement par secteur, il y a deux niveaux où autres apparaissent, puisqu'on a autres de façon globale, mais quand vous prenez le secteur privé, on parle de secteur privé et autres secteurs privés. Donc là encore, ça renvoie à une autre compréhension. Qu'est-ce qu'on entend par autre secteur privé et secteur privé? Et toujours par rapport à ces niveaux désagrégés, vous avez des ONG nationales, internationales et régionales. Comment faire la distinction? Et par rapport même à la collecte des données, ça va être un peu plus compliqué. Merci beaucoup.
So I think these are all good questions, and like on the question of like how we can start to connect the information. So I think we've showed here the higher level visualizations of the data. Of course, the original data is in the spreadsheets, and so like it's more clearly connected in the spreadsheets. So, but I think definitely we should probably talk a little bit more, and I can get a bit more of your feedback on the first point. And now I'm forgetting what the second point was. Can someone remind me the second point? Second point. Yes, on the categorizations. Thank you. Okay, so I mean so basically the reporting organization types are defined as part of the IATI standards. So there are definitions for these reporting organization types. The way in which we group organizations in IATI is often different than how organizations are grouped at the country level, and sometimes these categorizations can be a bit confusing. I think this is this is something that often comes up in discussions about data use, so I think definitely something, as I know there's a lot of conversations happening in different meetings at this community exchange about the IATI standard and improvements that would help. But I think some more clarification in how organizations are grouped and that reporting org type list could be potentially helpful.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So hi, everyone. I'm Alex Miller, the Senior Data Scientist with Development Initiatives, and I'm going to be presenting accessing IATI data using both the Datastore Search and the Datastore API. And I will apologize in advance. This is going to be a slightly more technical presentation. I apologize to the non-technical folks. I'm going to show you a little bit of code. And I apologize to the developers in the room because I have changed my editor to light mode. So that is better presented on the screen. So just to get started, I know we had a IATI 101 session this morning, so not everyone might actually be familiar with what the data store itself is. So the data store is a constantly updating repository of all the valid activity data created by our publishers. That data is available across thousands of different files via the IATI registry, but the data store consolidates it all in one location after running it through validation. Individual data fields within the XML are then flattened and indexed by our search engine. So prior to the Datastore Search, the only way to access the data in the data store was programmatically through our developer API. And while the API offers flexibility, it's obviously not accessible to users that don't have the technical capabilities to construct queries or write scripts. So long story short, the Datastore Search is our simplified user interface into as much of the functionality as we could make for the Datastore API. And these are my thoughts on sort of where all the data access tools lie across a matrix of IATI standard expertise and technical expertise. So if you're very tech savvy and you really know the standard very well, you might want to access the raw XML files from each individual publisher, iterate through all 8,000, read those in and analyze the raw data. If you still have that higher technical expertise, but maybe slightly less standard expertise, you don't know how to go to the registry, you don't know how to necessarily parse XML, you can pull it from the Datastore API. And then moving to lower technical expertise, We have a couple functionalities of the Datastore Search that span the gamut between high and medium standard expertise. So we have an advanced search, which requires a little bit more standard expertise to use. And then the simple search, which I think falls into the same sort of category as dportal. And then lastly, as Sarah presented, the very user-friendly CDFD is accessible to a lot of people as well. So what can the Datastore Search do? So it has what we call both a simple and advanced query builder. And so far in the last year of Datastore Search being available, we've had almost 13,000 individual searches run, about 6,000 on the simple search and about 7,000 on the advanced search. We have activities displayed with also links to dportal as a very user-friendly way of displaying all the fields of an individual activity. And we have multi-format export in XML, JSON, and CSV. And so if that's what the Datastore Search can do, then what can the Datastore API itself do? And it's essentially anything you can imagine with IATI data, and you're limited purely by your technical expertise. So over the past year, developers accessing the API have handled over 899,000 requests, and we've transferred almost 82 gigabytes of data to them through the Datastore API. And I sort of live my entire life on GitHub, so a lot of the URLs that I'm going to be mentioning here, as well as the small snippet of code I've written to demonstrate to you, are available in this repository. I'll just give you a moment. So it's akmiller01/IATI Datastore demo. So it is a little bit difficult to make the presentation of an API itself exciting, but I've done my best. So this is the code available on the repository. Some of you may recognize this as RStudio. So I've written this example in R, and I'm just going to pull in my personal API key. And you can see here that I've written a query to the Datastore API. I'm pointing it at the activity core, and I've given it a query for star equals star. So that means I just want everything. Give me absolutely all of the data in IATI. And I've passed some additional parameters here. I'm going to facet the data by recipient country code and return it to me as JSON. So while I pull that in, if anyone would like to have a guess of which country receives the most number of activities in the entire universe of IATI. Do we have any guesses? Ukraine? Okay, some good guesses. And we can't forget, of course, that the recipient country code is available both at the activity level and the transaction level. So here I'm also going to query the API for the exact same thing, but all of the transaction level recipients. And you can see these queries run instantaneously despite this pulling in data from every single activity ever published by any publisher. And then we can just merge those two data sets and calculate the sum. So who guessed Kenya? Anybody? No guesses. Ethiopia and India next. But of course, there has to be a little bit of a payoff for showing you all this code and text. So I've also written a small routine here to pull all of that in and display it to you as a choropleth map. So you can see the countries we highlighted as the top three, Kenya, Ethiopia, and India there in dark red, and the rest. So again, this code is available at that URL, and I can share it again later after the presentation if anyone is interested. So then we can move on to, and just one quick moment. So the way that you register for an API key, it's developer.iatistandard.org, and all of the parameters I used in that code are fully documented here as an enterprise level API. So then we can actually move on to the Datastore Search itself, which is You don't need to know how to use an API or how to build parameters to use it. So this is the simple search to our Datastore Search tool. And you can pick a keyword. You can say you're interested in agriculture, and we want to know who's funding bananas. So this is the results page of the simple search. We can see it's found 525 activities that contain the keyword banana in any narrative field across all of the elements in the IATI XML. You can download these full results regardless of how many. In fact, you can even, if you happen to build a query that returns the entirety of IATI, presently about 800,000 activities, you can download them all in a single spreadsheet. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's possible. XML, JSON, CSV, and Excel there. And just to save ourselves the short download time there, this is our banana.csv that I have downloaded for us. And this is the standard and nothing but the standard. It's a completely objective view of the data. We haven't done any post-processing, so there's no assumptions taken on the data here at all. And if you're conducting your own analyses, you're safe in the knowledge that this is directly as published by the publishers. And you can take these fields and throw them into a pivot table or pull them into your own analyses from there. And because we've built our search engine on a technology called Solar, there's also some search tools that I'd like to tell you about. And there's also a entire about 11-page user guide that I provided in that GitHub repository as well. But say, for example, that you wanted to search for either Latina or Latino. You could do one search for one word and one search for the other, and then try to combine the results, but you might have duplicates. So we have wildcard searching, and the question mark there represents exactly one character. So if we run that search, it should yield to us results. We can see there that's matched Latina. That's with an E. So it's exactly one character away from that. We also have wildcards in terms of asterisks, which can represent any number of characters. So if you wanted agriculture, agricultural, agrivoltaic, what have you, you can do agri-star, and it will return to you, these 74-some thousand activities that happen to contain words that begin with agri. We've also got quotes. So say, for example, if you wanted to search for interagency, we look through here, you'll notice it's matching things like inter-American, and that's because it's going to match any of the terms in this query. So if we put that in quotes, it will only return to us the 2,000 activities that have that exact phrase in them. And then a lot of these things can be combined with Booleans as well. If you're familiar with the advanced search on Google, for example, it's very similar. So if you wanted Congo and democratic, that will ensure that both those terms show up in there. You could do Congo or democratic. And then one neat additional search tool I'd like to show is called proximity search, which is something I hadn't come across in many search engines before. But you can actually put a term in quotes. Say you're looking for Tripoli, Libya, but they might be mentioning the city in one sentence and then mentioning the country in another. You can use a tilde and a number, and this will return to you all the activities that use both the word Tripoli and Libya within 20 words of each other. So you can be very specific just with the simple search builder. And then just quickly moving on to the advanced, I can show off a couple of the special features that the advanced builder lets you do above and beyond the simple search. So where the simple search is based purely on the narrative fields, you can filter by any, and I mean absolutely any of the fields in IATI here. So if for example, we wanted to do the reporting orograph, and we wanted to do US Gov 1. Instead of searching for just the term US Gov 1, this is only going to return activities published by USAID because we've searched in the reporting or greph field. We have a special field here called Boolean groupings, which lets you combine some things. So we can do, for example, recipient country code. Let's do not Liechtenstein, please. Let's do Lebanon. And transaction, recipient country code. Oop, that's region code. Transaction, recipient country code. Also Lebanon there. And then we can close off that Boolean grouping. Oh, I guess the US has not funded any in Lebanon, but we can run that there. And this will return to us, oh, that's why I've done and instead of or. Okay, so either at the recipient country code level or the transaction recipient country code level. And then one additional special field I wanted to show off is our geospatial search. So this has actually done a geospatial index on the latitude and longitude points in IATI. And you can see as I pan and zoom the map, it's changing the bounds up at the top here. So we can, zoom into a country, hit apply, clear out some of these other filters, and hit run. And so there are almost 14,000 activities that have latitudes and longitudes that are within the bounds of this map that we've defined. So that is everything I wanted to show on the demonstration. And I can quickly preview, we are working on some improvements to the advanced query builder. We recognized that using the Boolean groupings especially was quite complicated. So we're trying to improve that graphical user interface and make the advanced query builder a little bit more intuitive. Okay, and I think we can take questions. Kate.
Question, it's just mentioning another feature. So I needed to do some searching on the Datastore Search. It was the only tool that was going to allow me the specificity that I needed, but I felt a bit like I couldn't do all of this. But you can also get someone else to build you a search and they can send it to you as JSON and you can add it into the advanced query builder and then you can edit it. So if you have a slightly more technical colleague than you, they can kick off the process and then you've got a query where you can just change parameters within it and that makes it, yeah, here we go. It's so cool. This saved me hours.
Yeah, I built a couple of queries that way before.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I feel the fool. This is amazing. Is there video? I know there was a training video on the country tool, but is there one on this that we could hand to our technical people that understand Boolean and other things?
Yeah, so I believe it was actually unlisted on the IATI YouTube channel, but on Connect here, you can find, I did a presentation on this, and it was very kindly edited down into a more digestible video.
Thank you very much.
Great. I think we can take some joint questions for Sarah and I if people had more on the CDFD as well. And maybe just 5 more minutes so we don't overrun our coffee break too much.
Henriette, please go ahead.
Just a question. Suppose I have something which I think is a relatively simple search which would fit the country development finance data fields, which I can filter there. if I would put exactly the same filters into the data search, would I get exactly the same results, or have you done some quality check across, or tell me?
So this is a good question. I think, like, just to say that, like, I think that we're all very well aware at the Secretariat that, there is a desire for more consolidation, and sort of in user experience of our tools, right? There's multiple different places. So, like, that's why this question, I think is particularly relevant, because it's like, it's a good one. You have multiple different tools. Are they processing the data in the same way? Are you going to get the same results? And right now there are some differences in the way in which the tools process the data, but I think Alex can speak to that at a more technical level, so maybe I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, the Datastore API and the Datastore Search are tied into the unified platform. So those are all fetched and processed from the same repository of IATI data, which is the activity level validated activities. The country data tool and dPortal both process IATI through separate pipelines, so those would have a slightly different view of the data. For example, if they were able to parse an activity, even if it may be invalid, it would still probably show up in dPortal or in CDFD. Johanna?
And maybe just as a follow-up, how big would the difference be between those, or that depends on how many invalid activities you have somewhere floating around?
It's a good question. Alex, do you happen to know I don't know, like, because I mean, since the activity level validation was introduced, like, I'm not sure, like, how many actually invalid activities, because since that was changed from, like, like, it used to be, like, validated at the file level, and now at the activity level, I think there's a lot less probably, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know I can look this up for you later, but I would estimate probably about 1% difference in the number of activities.
Johanna, please go ahead.
So, actually, it made me think of that, but so the data store will just return the list of activities, and there's no aggregation at all of the data. You're just getting, whereas the country development finance data is aggregated. So one of the questions is, how is the currency, like, what exchange rates are used to aggregate the values and things like that? Because that would be kind of one obvious difference between the data sets you would get.
Yeah, so that's definitely the case. So I think this is a good opportunity to show that the methodology for how the data is processed is all here on the country development finance data tool. So if we go down to currency conversion, you can see that it's taken from the monthly exchange rates from the IMF. So yeah, like, it's a very good point, because obviously you have to convert the currency, convert them somehow, right? So this is the decision that was made in this tool to be able to do that. Yeah, so, like, obviously if you're doing your own analysis using the raw data from that you've downloaded from the data store, using different currency conversion, you could get slightly different results based on the exchange rates that you might be using.
And I can't read it from here,
Okay.
but are you using the date of the activity of the transaction? Okay, so it will kind of get the exchange rate